British Army in 2017 finds itself in uncharted territory. They've not been at war for 3 years.
Yeah, move!
After controversial campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, there's a political reluctance to put boots on the ground. There's also widespread opposition to military intervention. The army's budgets are under increasing pressure.
They could go and maneuver without firing ammunition. It saves you 2 million of the 3.8 that you hope to save.
The British Army is smaller than it's been probably since Cromwell's day. And I would want to look myself very closely in the mirror if I felt that there was a risk of the army being sent to do something that it wasn't properly prepared to do.
But now, with the rise of the so-called Islamic State, the threat of a new Cold War in Eastern Europe, and famine and conflict in sub-Saharan Africa, the British Army have to play a new role in a deeply unstable world.
How many patients do you usually see a day?
700 to 800.
Filmed over 18 months, this series takes us into the heart of the British Army.
How many Russians are across the border? 100,000 odd?
Yeah, a lot.
Through the eyes of the rank and file.
No one else has operated in Estonia before. This is completely different from Afghanistan and Iraq.
And the leaders.
General, how are you? Good to see you.
Very nice to see you too.
We see the challenges of fighting wars when we are not at war.
Days of going out fighting the enemy such as ISIS for reasons above our pay grade. That doesn't happen anymore.
In this episode, the British Army is deployed to one of the most dangerous places in the world.
4-barrel long rocket system.
On a UN peacekeeping operation to protect thousands fleeing South Sudan's civil war.
It has been known for the Dinka soldiers to try and sneak in. The danger then is that the conflict would start in the POC camp.
Rape is frequently used as a weapon. The sense of right and wrong is skewed absolutely the wrong way.
In a country where government troops can be lawless and corrupt.
There you go. We can stop now. This is SPA.
So I think it is money time from UN, so that's why we need the UN to come.
Can the British Army help build peace and stop genocide? In a matter of weeks, 400 British soldiers will join a UN peacekeeping operation in South Sudan, a country torn apart by civil war.
2 men just died along this wall here.
Escaping war and famine, thousands of civilians in South Sudan have sought sanctuary at UN camps. Today, 100 actors will test if the British soldiers will be ready to deal with civilians in need of protection.
Who is in charge here? Hey, let me talk. You in charge. She needs to sit down. Come, brothers. Come, brothers. Straight up. Help us. Take us to the UN. My friend, give us a lift to the camp. We want food. We want food. We want food. We want food.
A lot of what we focus on is the worst case scenario. Prepping our guys so that if everything goes wrong, they can still react effectively.
There was plenty that we didn't search. Okay. However, no one came through carrying anything suspicious. We're now getting eyes on them from inside this building and there. Okay. Let's try and identify people within stuff.
This is the type of training that makes sure that if we do have to protect civilians from an enemy force, we're confident that we can do so.
Let's set them in, let's set them in. Let's get them in, come on.
The really great thing about this exercise is that all of the actors playing the civilian population are actually from South Sudan. So they've been able to feed in a lot of information to us. One of the stories that was particularly pertinent and really stuck with our guys was one of a father and a son. They were approaching a checkpoint in South Sudan, and unfortunately they didn't have anything to give to the checkpoint, so no money, no cigarettes, no water or food. The checkpoint opened fire on them both because they had nothing to give, and unfortunately his father was killed. These people have grown up in conflict, and for us to be able to go out and, you know, go some way to resolving that is a really great thing for us to do.
South Sudan is the world's newest country. It gained independence from Sudan in 2011, but quickly descended into civil war as rebels from the Nuer tribe tried to overthrow government forces from the Dinka tribe, known as the SPLA. 50,000 people have been killed, and over 3 million forced to flee their homes.
So that is the doctrinal side of it, where you're...
This will be the British Army's first humanitarian peacekeeping mission, since they and the UN were unable to stop the massacres in Bosnia in the 1990s.
Stability will only be achieved in South Sudan if the fledgling state is able to stand on its own 2 feet. Personal security is a real issue, whether that's sexual violence or attacks between various tribal elements. Providing security for the population is key. Violence can break out. We could have a major natural disaster, inflows of refugees, economic downturns, contests for the transition of power. And I'd suggest that we've got most of those going on in South Sudan. So they are all eating away at the stability of the state.
The UN's role in South Sudan is to provide humanitarian aid, broker peace, and protect civilians escaping the war. 14,000 UN soldiers and police currently guard 210,000 civilians who have sought sanctuary in 8 POCs, protection of civilian camps, and try to patrol the wider country.
Just have a look at Winston Churchill's view of the United Nations. So nobody is saying that the UN is going to be able to solve all of those problems. There are many challenges, but it's about, through your mission, supporting in every way you can.
Thank you for coming to speak to us today. It's been a tremendously informative presentation.
Lieutenant Colonel Jason Ainley will be the commanding officer of the British Army in South Sudan.
Thank you.
Rape is frequently used as a weapon over there. I think women are very vulnerable. We hear horrible stories of women leaving the protection of civilian sites to go and get firewood, and soldiers capturing them and raping them. The sense of right and wrong is skewed absolutely the wrong way.
This is a very different mission for the British Army. They must take orders from the UN, who can only operate with the consent of the 2 warring factions in South Sudan. The British contingent of engineers, medics and infantrymen will be deployed to bolster security and infrastructure at 2 of the biggest POC camps.
Great lad.
Around that camp, they need to protect these civilians, so they need fencing, they need berms, they need watchtowers, they need roads to be able to move supplies, they need helicopter landing pads to get more supplies in, and that's where we come in, because we provide that engineering support to, you know, either repair that infrastructure or actually put it in place.
One detachment of 190 British soldiers have been posted to Malakal, in the northeast of the country. The area has been subject to fierce fighting, as government SPLA troops and Dinka militia try to wrestle control of the oil-rich region from the Nuer tribe. Malagal has changed hands 12 times in the last 3 years. Government SPLA soldiers now control the city. For 30,000 civilians from the Nuer tribe, aligned to the rebels, and another local tribe, the Shilluk, who have been caught in the crossfire, the camp is their only safe haven.
First and foremost, we're here for the protection of civilians. We're not here to take side. If there's any threat, then we're here to react to that.
25-year-old rifleman Sam Warner is one of 30 British soldiers manning a watchtower in the British sector of the UN base.
Open area of the field in front, the children playing football. To the right there's the POC camp itself, that dominates the ground to that side. You can see the front of the area, it's called Juliet Gates, where the locals come in and out of when they're gathering food and working into the fields. And then in front of me you've got the road, obviously going from the gate to the POC camp. There was an RPG warhead that was dropped just outside. Potentially someone was trying to smuggle it in, got cold feet at the last minute and just ditched it at the gate.
Maintaining security here is fraught with problems. The SPLA claim the POC is harboring Nuer rebels. The UN must stop SPLA soldiers and Dinka militia entering the POC and launching attacks. At the same time, they must also prevent the Nuer rebels using the POC as a base. Spotting who is a civilian and who is a combatant is not easy.
It has been known for the Dinka soldiers sort of affiliated with the government forces to try and sneak into the POC camp. The danger then is that the conflict would start in the POC camp, which is obviously not what we want at all. So we're here in case it did happen, we're here to stop that.
With the SPLA controlling the surrounding area, the UN estimate life expectancy for Nuer and Shilluk men who leave the POC is just 30 minutes.
Well, you're told that there's a potential security threat to the fighting age males who could be mistaken for a combatant. So the vast majority of, the human traffic that goes in and out is either very old men or it's predominantly women.
100 UN troops from Ethiopia, Rwanda and India man the perimeter gates and enforce security inside the POC, which stretches across 2 square miles.
It is quite surprising when you look at the size of the POC camp. It is quite surprising just how many people there are. You're told about it, obviously all our briefs and everything about what to expect, but it is quite a shock when you first get here. You good? Good? Come on, mate.
What is your name?
My name's Sam.
Sam.
What's your name?
My name is Shams.
Good?
Yes, money.
Can we give you money?
Yeah.
I haven't got any money, mate. Never at our time, it doesn't really bear thinking about sort of... Yeah, Britannia, yeah. I mean, I guess you try and understand, so it gives you a better rapport with the locals and you try and sort of see things from their side of things, but I don't think you really can fully understand. It's a completely different world.
This is the gun.
Huh? No.
Gun forward.
To protect me and to protect you.
Just 11 months before the British arrived, UN guards failed to defend the camp. "100 SPLA soldiers breached the camp's perimeter. They killed 30 Nuer and Shilluk civilians and 2 aid workers. They burned down a third of the POC. Hundreds were crushed in the stampede to escape. the UN was criticized for failing to act.
Essentially, if there's a threat to human life, we'd react and get rid of that threat, and if necessary, as a last resort, by means of lethal force.
The UN base at Malakal is in desperate need of improvements to its infrastructure. British engineers are undertaking major renovations to expand the camp and enable more UN troops to be deployed to the region and increase security for the civilians here.
So just go for 5 big ones from there to there.
Get off. Oh, this. It's because the second layer's not going to go under it. First layer's going under it. Okay.
They are building watchtowers, security fences, and gates.
There's still a little bit of pipe work to do here, but it's not a massive amount.
Lieutenant Colonel Jason Ainley is overseeing the construction.
We've got the civilians just behind us, you know, over 30,000 civilians. Sometimes you can see them poking their heads up behind the perimeter over there because they're just curious about what we do. I've got very young children too, and when I see the young children going around the POC site, it always makes me think of my children. At one point, we nearly built walls that were slightly higher than that, but our previous experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan were not exactly applicable here. You know, what we really need to do is, tune into the environment, and that's what we did. So we lowered our wall so that we didn't create Fortress Britannia in a United Nations base.
Food and medical aid inside the POC is provided by hundreds of UN aid agency staff. British engineers are supporting them by building access roads and helicopter landing pads so aid can be shipped in.
We can do our best to create an environment where aid can get to those who need it. But there is disease, malaria, cholera, typhoid, and many within the UN will say this is one of the most challenging peacekeeping operations currently undertaken by the United Nations, and I can see exactly why. I mean, the situation's dire. It's tragic. It's utterly tragic.
Another 160 British soldiers have been deployed 120 miles southeast of Malakal to Bentiu. The area was once a stronghold for rebel forces from the Nuer tribe. In 2014, they massacred over 300 people they suspected of being government supporters. When SPLA troops recaptured Bentiu, thousands of Nuer sought refuge in a UN camp fearing reprisals. The camp has now trebled in size, making it the second largest city in South Sudan. Just 1,200 UN peacekeepers protect 120,000 civilians here. Security is tight. The Nuer fear they will be targeted by the SPLA if they leave.
Fighting is really very random. They don't differentiate between a man, women, and children. This is why all people come to the camp, because every person is really looking for safety and security. Without peace, they cannot go back. Yeah, only peace will take them back.
In a secure compound on the edge of the camp, British engineers have been tasked to build a field hospital for UN soldiers and staff here.
Let's get blokes on the drash, just get lifted up, brought into the centre, stood upright. Let's get the bag off from her. 1, 2, 3. Push, push.
At the moment, there is no proper medical facilities here. If someone is shot, They have to be evacuated by air to the capital, Juba, 600 miles away.
We put up the outer frames. We can use it to put up. Yeah, take that one off, please.
It means UN soldiers in Bentiu have to limit their patrols outside the POC, and other member states are reluctant to send troops here.
Just on that, mate. Can you strip that door frame there, ready for a corridor, please?
Army medic Sergeant Michael Owen is playing a lead role in the construction.
We've still got another drash to go here, which is going to give us our laboratory and microbiology over in that area there. And then we've still got a little bit to go down here as well, some ISOs to go in. Another tent down there for sort of our ambi troop in case they have to go anywhere, but then they'll be stationed there as well. 1, 2, 3, step, and step to the right.
He joined the army when he was 16.
Just before I turned 10, my mum passed away of cancer, and after that I realised I wanted to help people. So kind of wanted to do medicine, something with the military, and that kind of just tilted me towards sort of being a medic in the army. There's the point of moving that. We could do that by hand without lifting it.
It's just a hand move.
When up and running, the hospital will contain an intensive care unit, an operating theatre, several wards, and will be staffed by 80 British medics. Sergeant Owen has just 2 weeks to get everything ready.
Everyone's hot, everyone's bothered, especially during the day. It's very hot, you can't really escape the heat that well, so everyone's quite stressed on trying to meet the goal as well.
The 120,000 refugees inside the camp are treated in a hospital run by the NGO Médecins Sans Frontières. Lieutenant Colonel Simon Horn is one of the lead consultants for the British Army.
I think everybody's wanted at some point to hop the fence and go and do some medicine for the people who clearly need it over there. But one of our strengths and weaknesses in a facility like this is that we're very highly capable, but our capacity is tiny. And so we could help the person in front of us, but we couldn't help the person behind them. We can't look after everybody in South Sudan. That's not our job, but also there are lots of other people here who can. The NGOs are all here to do that and are doing it very well. What UNMISS needs is the confidence that its personnel are being looked after to an adequate level, and that's what we provide.
The hope is that the hospital will encourage other nations to commit more troops to Bentiu. With a larger protection zone, the newer may feel safe enough to leave the POC and return home. Across the country, just 14,000 UN soldiers and police must try to protect a population over 12 million living outside the POCs. They are thinly spread across 18 bases in a country the same size as France. Vast areas are not patrolled by the UN. They remain unmonitored and exposed to violence. The SPLA are still fighting newer rebels just 60 miles from Bentiu, and famine has been declared in the wider state, forcing more newer to arrive at the POC. "25-year-old Lieutenant Gavin Knox is in charge of force security for the British Army here. Today he is receiving a briefing about the fighting and the tactics the SPLA use.
So, just a brief situation update. I'm not going to smash you with this. This is just so you guys can be kept up to date with what exactly is going on. The SPLA, the government, have a brigade in almost every county. The anti-government forces are massively outmatched in terms of manpower, equipment and supplies. So I've got a couple of videos to show you now of them actually at work, and you can just see they've got very poor control of fire, they don't really use cover, and when you see them actually firing the weapon systems, you can see that it's nowhere near to sort of our levels of marksmanship. As you saw, there were guys pointing their weapons in the air, looking confused. The firing you saw was from the hip, with no real sort of control of fire or discipline at all. In terms of their structure, they've got a lot of junior officers including some who've actually been trained by us at Sandhurst. But down at the fighting units, as you can see, it's more or less chaos. It is just sort of pick up your weapon system and run around. They still think it's okay to take a village, to commit some sort of abuses of power and authority, which we do see a lot of, and that includes taking as much food, money and equipment as they can carry. That's the SPLA fighting. It's important to remember that those rebels, the anti-government forces, a lot of them are former SPLA who defected. So from this, we can apply the same sort of thinking to how the rebels fight. In terms of armour, it's a ZPU-4. You can put up to 150 rounds a minute into the air with a range out to 2 kilometres. Previously, we have seen one UN helicopter be shot down in South Sudan. So for what that means for us is it can absolutely threaten our air supply routes as well as any other air supply routes. Again, they've got sort of similar ranges to the SA-80.
83 aid workers and 13 UN peacekeepers have been killed in the war. The British Army can only use force to protect themselves and the civilians if they come under direct attack. Today, Lieutenant Knox and 10 of his force protection team are going to check on the security situation in Bentiu town centre.
If we just looked at things that were within our camp, we'd have a very limited knowledge of actually, you know, what are the government forces doing, what are the forces in opposition doing. Even getting out to Bentiu and Rib Connor allows us to have that wider understanding and preempt anything that may or may not be coming our way. We'll be going through Rib Connor itself. Rib Connor is very, very busy. There is a divisional headquarters of the SPLA, so expect to see a lot of SPLA troops, a lot of activity and also a lot of civilians around that area. If we do come under any small arms fire, just conduct the vehicle contact drills as you've been taught. So more than likely, provided that one of the vehicles isn't disabled, we'll just be driving straight through that contact, okay?
UN patrols outside the POC camps are frequently curtailed by the SPLA. They don't want the UN to interfere in their operations.
Slow right down, slow right down. Pull over. SPLA vehicle in the middle of our convoy. 4-barrel long rocket system. We've seen them quite a few times. I don't know whether they use them for intimidation or whether they just use them as troop carrying vehicles. I'm not sure. We've seen a few though. When we turn right here, you'll see the T-55 on your left-hand side. Well, directly behind you guys as you see it. So this is Bentiu itself now then. These are what were the suburbs and stuff like that.
It's a bit like London.
Yo! Hello?
12-year-old with an AK-47.
That's fucking AK, man.
Over 17,000 children have been recruited to fight in the war.
These children are, you know, they're the next generation of South Sudan. To think that they've already been warped at such an early age, you know, 11, 12, by the conflict in such a direct manner is certainly a disturbing thought. If you could keep yourself +2 here to look after the vehicles along with Team Med.
How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah.
Good.
I didn't want that.
Where are you going?
Yeah.
Here?
The Nuer have left the town for the safety of the POC. Only civilians from the Dinka remain.
Bentiu is somewhere that you can look at, and the mark of conflict is pretty much everywhere you look, unfortunately. Just to the right over there, you've got the remnants of the university. Bentiu, as far as I'm aware, according to the local people, was a thriving university town. So yeah, as you can see, there is a remnant of a society here that was actually getting on quite well. Since the conflict, everything that isn't necessary for survival, unfortunately, has just been left. And you can see where, walls have turned into rubble. You're probably not going to see Atletico Bentiu FC playing here anytime soon.
In 2014, in Bentiu town centre, Nuer rebels carried out the worst massacre in South Sudan's ongoing civil war.
The victims of what the United Nations mission in South Sudan is calling an ethnic massacre. Anti-government forces entered the mosque, separated ethnic groups and escorted them to safety, while the others were killed.
The sight of bodies piled on streets, as well as in mosques, has outraged the international community.
The United States strongly condemns the recent targeted killings last week of hundreds of civilians in Bentiu based on their ethnicity and nationality.
Thousands fled here to the safety of a UN compound when which tribe you were from suddenly became a question of life or death.
At the time, the UN did not have enough soldiers to stop the rebels, who hunted down Dinka civilians over 2 days, killing 300 men, women, and children.
Male, how you doing? How you doing? Hello, how you doing?
The UN must now continue to build trust here.
The UN's been criticised in the past for not acting as strongly as it maybe could have done in a situation in order to prevent something pretty seriously bad from happening. And absolutely that's something that the UK does not want to be criticised of. In Bentiu, and a lot of the scars are still very, very fresh there and haven't had time to heal at all. The daily struggle of the people here to simply survive on what little they have is, it's quite a lot to take in sometimes.
At Malakal, supplies of UN food and medical aid can reach critically low levels. UN convoys traveling by road are increasingly being attacked and looted.
Got water?
Got water.
All right, cool. Right, yep, let's shut this up. Logistics-wise, we're in the middle of nowhere, really. When the rainy season occurs, getting here is a nightmare because there's no roads. So that limits it down to air or water. So a lot of the vital supplies for the people in this place rely on the jetty.
Engineer Sergeant Cunliffe is helping the UN to build a jetty along the Nile in an attempt to establish a more reliable supply route.
Hello, lads. How you doing?
Leaving the base comes with risk. South Sudan is one of the world's poorest countries. Corruption is rife, and UN staff frequently become targets of extortion.
one day I was along this road. I was escorting the new LEC, so the locally employed contractor or civilian, to the water point. And we're driving along this road. He had a brand new governmental vehicle. So we got stopped by the SPLA at the checkpoint here. And they were just, they just wanted that vehicle, basically. First of all, he said, this is not a UN vehicle. And I said, oh, yes, it is, it's a UN vehicle. And he goes, no, no, it's governmental. So I wasn't going to argue them. There was 10 of them. So unfortunately, they took the vehicle. They took the civilian driver as well. However, it was a bit scary. There we go. We're going to stop now. This is SPLA.
An SPLA soldier spots our camera.
Because it's not allowed. It's not allowed to take the photos. You have to come to us here to us to take the permission. So that is bad, and there is some violation between UN and government. So we
Despite having approved government permits, the SPLA soldier demands money.
I think it is money time from UN, so that's why we need the UN to come. So I cannot able to move without the information. Yeah.
After payment is refused, an uneasy standoff lasts over 30 minutes. We are eventually escorted to the jetty with the SPLA in tow. UN staff frequently face threats of intimidation and extortion from the SPLA. There is little they can do, as they must maintain the permission of the government to operate here.
This is the entrance to the jetty. Okay, cheers. Thank you, sir. Cheers.
For Sergeant Cunliffe, it comes with the territory of operating in a war zone.
When I was in Iraq, I remember driving my Land Rover, and there was about 100 people on top of this bridge, and I went under the bridge. There's no other way to go, and I got bricked and stoned. I lost 2 front teeth, fractured eye socket, 70 stitches. I got knocked out unconscious as well. Then they sent me to Birmingham Hospital. We're going to do it roughly about here. Believe it or not, 3 weeks after being back in the UK, I was back out there. I felt I had unfinished business there. I didn't want to let the lads down. I wanted to be with the lads. Amazing. How many people can say they've worked by the Nile?
The British Army is helping the UN build a permanent port here, so large containers of aid can be shipped in.
It's a massive job. So every nation and the POCs, they all rely on this jetty for, you know, sources of food to come in, materials to build. You know, by doing all this, the logistics-wise of it, we're helping people that are a lot less fortunate than us. And the longer we stay here, the more we benefit these poor people.
The port will take months to build. Before construction can begin, Sergeant Cunliffe and Sapper Stuart Whittaker take soil samples to see if the ground is stable enough to support what will be a major build.
There's local earth. So we're going to get a sample of that so we can fully classify it. It's going down quite nice, isn't it? Yeah. It's not very good for building, to be honest. It's a very stiff clay. This is the first time that myself and Stuart worked on a rig together.
You know what I could go for right now? Nice glass of rum.
Oh,
I'll go down well nice.
Yeah. A nice bath as well, that'd be nice.
In Bentiu, British medics and engineers have made rapid progress in the construction of the hospital in the last week.
It's just to test that is, and you can get down there.
Today, all the equipment is finally going in.
At the moment, we're just putting tables, chairs, stools, benches and things like that. Once labs and micro are built, that is effectively the main hospital facility complete. Toilets need to be put into place, the water needs, make sure we've got a decent water supply, the electrics are working, the aircon's working, all the power's working. It's going to be a long day, but it's going to be a good day, hopefully.
For Sergeant Owen, the hospital construction has been a personal test of his character. He spent 18 months on medical leave after his last overseas operation.
My last tour of Afghan in 2009, I was injured in an IED blast. Myself and the vehicle commander, we were both injured at the time. He sort of was very badly injured. At the time I broke my leg, my left leg in a few places, completely destroyed my right elbow. So that was a very, very challenging moment for me, especially as a medic, to be that injured while there was another patient who was a lot more sicker than me, and I couldn't do anything at the time. And this deployment was just to show that, how bad your times have been, you can still do your job just that one more time. So, yeah.
With the hospital close to completion and resources freed up, Lieutenant Knox wants to see if the British Army can do more to support civilians outside the POC camp.
Apparently, this bridge was built in the late 90s by Osama bin Laden. We've got a great deal of expertise within the British contingent here. We've got medics, doctors, we have engineers. The next step is to start looking outside of the POC, to start looking at the services communities run on, schools, universities, basic medical care. It's about jump-starting those resources so that when people leave the POC site, they're not left with cities that look like Bentiu does at the minute. Just 2 people out guarding each vehicle at one time, OK? That's all we need, all right? Don't put anyone up on the stairs or anything like that, OK?
The UN and state governor have given Lieutenant Knox special permission to visit the local hospital.
So you're just happy to show us exactly, what you require here and what you think that would be good for the UN to supply you to get this hospital back up to, the capacity that you were running at before the conflict?
Yeah. Director Dr. Rasiban has worked here for over 5 years.
What are the main diseases and things that you treat here?
Yeah, the malaria is endemic.
Right.
The malaria cases are more. So we have infection.
Yeah.
Yeah, like diarrhea cases and typhoid fever cases.
Typhoid.
Yeah, typhoid fever cases. So these are the patients.
Yeah,
this is the waiting bay. Yeah, they used to sit here. So
there's a lot of people in here.
Yeah, a lot of people.
I mean, it's only 10:30 in the morning and already you're very full. How many patients do you usually see a day?
So this it varies between 700 to 800 per a day. Yeah. So they can continue like this up to the evening. They use coming. Okay. You can treat. They can go. They can come. So.
And that's between 47 staff, did you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We have only one microscope for RDT for testing malaria.
Okay.
But we don't have too much equipment here.
So you can test for malaria, but treating for it is difficult.
Yeah.
You just don't have the.
Yeah. But we are in need of equipment in the lab, even the machine for testing the sample that you can take from the TB patient. We don't have here. So we need a lot of machines. Yeah.
The hospital has been repeatedly looted. In 2014, 33 patients and staff were executed here, forcing many of the staff to flee.
Hello, how are you doing? Lieutenant Gavin Knox. How are you doing?
The consultation room for ops and gyna.
We're just doing a bit of a look around the hospital to see what, quick projects the UN might be able to do here to help you guys.
We have problem admitting patients if we go another inpatient rooms. We find them, they're lying down like this, no beds, no mattresses.
Right. So you need the rooms renovating first and then beds to...
Yes, and beds and mattresses and bed sheets.
The war has pushed South Sudan's healthcare system to crisis point. The country has one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world. Over 10% of children die before the age of 5.
It's almost awe-inspiring that these people can work in such poor conditions and yet achieve so much with so little. I think that is, one of the places where UN could have a huge impact. If we're able to just give them that little bit extra, the electricity connected into one of their wards, the air conditioning put back into one of their operating theatres, clean out a room, tidy up the outside, mend their fencing so that people aren't stealing their pharmaceutical supplies, we could have a huge impact.
Lieutenant Knox must now wait for approval from the UN and the South Sudanese government before any British medics or engineers can help the local hospital. At the camp, the British medics have finished building the hospital for the UN.
From our right side here, we've got our X-ray department with Seraton, so the CT scanner, just the head. We'll then come up this way. So depending on the severity of the patient, we're going to go left or right. If we go right, it's our surgical team. There should be 2 surgical bays in here with CSSD where they can sterilise their instruments at the back. Through to this way, we've got ITU, so our sick patients or patient post-surgery or poorly patients can come in here and be closely monitored. Through to the top, up here on the right, we've got our labs. So in here will be fridges, freezer with blood and other products and that. They'll also be able to test blood samples and other specimen samples. Through the back there, they've got the microbiology. So in there's going to be lots of powerful microscopes, things like that. Hello, my dear, how are you? Good afternoon.
Bye. See you tomorrow.
Yeah.
I need to...
Yeah, of course. We'll sort that out.
It's good?
Yeah, it's good.
Good.
It's good, all good.
Happy?
Happy, very happy. Are you happy?
You are happy.
Good, good. I'm pretty happy with it. It'll do. Hopefully it'll survive its first storm, so that's the next big one.
For Sergeant Owen, the success of the hospital build has its contradictions.
It's a very, very difficult situation for all of us, especially all the medical. We'd love to be able to open up and help everybody, knowing that there are poorly people and the way the locals live. It is always at the back of the head, but sometimes that's just where you've got to leave it. We're here to do a job. The job is to build the hospital, to allow the UN to go out and do the other tasks then to make those people's lives better.
Lieutenant Knox has been told his request to help the hospital in Bentiu town centre has been passed up the UN chain of command, and a decision could take months.
Of course it's frustrating. Whenever we can't do anything immediately as the British Army, it's very frustrating to us because that's how we operate. We've got to understand that this is a very new environment for us. We are starting to understand how things work here, and once we do, the frustrations will go and things may even happen a bit quicker.
Rainy season has hit Malakal. UN helicopters carrying vital medical supplies are struggling to land.
Have a step on this. So it's baked hard over there, but this is still soft and squidgy, and you can see. There we go. There's the mud under there. Yeah. So if they take off at 8:30 and don't land until 4:30, we've got that time frame.
British engineers have just 5 hours to do emergency repairs.
Just one.
Sergeant Cunliffe and Sapper Whittaker are brought in to help.
Say it's heavy rain or a thunderstorm, you don't want to land in this, get bogged in and get stuck, or even just any kind of little tip on a helicopter would just send it off one way. Could damage the helicopter. They're not cheap. They're not cheap at all.
And not just that, it's a vital means of getting materials and food sources in to the poor people in the POC.
Food goes down, water goes down, supplies go down. They then suffer even more, which is unnecessary, just because a helicopter went down because it landed on a NAF sign.
These drains that we dug before,
yes,
now they've been tested,
yes,
by the rain. Have they worked?
Lieutenant Colonel Jason Ainley is worried the heavy rains could leave the British Army isolated and exposed.
One of key concern to us is improving the road. When it rains, it's quite treacherous, so we worry a little bit about our escape routes. It doesn't take very long to turn this place into a proper swamp.
The pipes are in under there, but it requires kind of local titivation.
When we get into the guts of the rain season, that could become a real...
Oh, no, definitely.
I mean, worst case scenario, we'd be putting our high priority vehicles parked up along the Murrum Road just so we can get them out. We need to stop putting vehicles that we need to move quickly or that we need access to through the rain on first.
Yeah.
No, thanks very much for that, Pete.
That's okay.
I think that's it done.
The engineers finished their repairs just in time. The British Army has made significant improvements at Malakal. But as the UN increase infrastructure and aid at the POCs, they can create a culture of dependency. It's a vicious circle the UN wants to try and break.
We need to look at ideas about how do we support people to return to the places of origin. That's a key aspect. The POC site is temporary, and yes, it's been long. It's been 3.5 years, but now we need to look what are the security that the people in the POC need to address with the government and in relation to
Lieutenant Colonel Jason Ainley is meeting with the UN head of the Malakal camp, Namibian lawyer Hazel de Vet. The UN is now trying to broker a peace deal so the newer here feel safe enough to leave.
Government says they want peace, and so we've been talking to all the security organs, the SPLA, the SSPS, South Sudan Police Force. The government has been very clear that they would want for them to come out. But the POC community need to feel that they have a level of security.
Are we still seeing Dinkas being moved back into Malakal from Juba?
Yes, that's still happening. That is the government policy and approach. I'm working with government. We need to look at what I call a menu of options.
Well, thanks so much for your time.
Lieutenant Colonel Ainley fears the government's strategy to repopulate Malakal solely with Dinkas will undermine the UN's efforts.
Bringing Dinka in to populate the town doesn't chime right with me in terms of the long-term prospects for this area. There's also a lot of Shilluk and Nuer people inside this POC camp that clearly don't quite feel safe yet to go back to living outside of the camp. It is really hard to see a solution in the short term to this country, because at the moment there is still divisions. You can't ignore that.
The 30,000 in the POC camp don't trust the government. They are scared to leave and cannot support themselves. In the 4 weeks that Rifleman Sam Warner has been in Malakal, he has not dealt with any outbreaks of violence.
We had a child today with a toy pistol. It looks quite realistic. I think once he realised that we thought it was maybe real, he dropped it and off he went. He didn't mean any harm, he was just, I think it's just a normal kid just running about. I think they like us being here. I think they like knowing that if something was to happen, that we are here to react. So if anything was to happen, but you know, as best as possible, they are going to be looked after and they are going to be protected.
Have you been learning? Have you been to school? We've got.
Lieutenant Knox believes it will take decades for the country to heal.
It's actually quite interesting coming to South Sudan, being based in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is obviously a place that, again, has had a very, very troubled past. But today, when you're walking around Northern Ireland, it's just like being anywhere else in the UK. I'm hoping that in the same sort of time frame, the people of South Sudan can mend, you know, the wounds that have been caused by this conflict and work together to create a self-sustaining and working government.
The British Army have not fired a shot to protect the civilians in the first 5 months of their deployment, but they will be here for another 3 years.
I don't think we encountered the same threats that we prepared for, but you only have to study South Sudan for half an hour to realise that most of the crises that have happened here have happened at a moment's notice. It goes very bad, very quickly. Ultimately, the government of South Sudan is responsible for providing security and protection to its own people. But I don't think there is yet anybody that can unite all sides.
The international community has given £4 billion in aid to South Sudan, but the country still remains in the midst of a humanitarian crisis.